Today we're going to be talking about two books from a fantastic writer, developed many years apart, but recently released. And I think that they're going to be something really big in the future. What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to Kamikaze. My name's Q. Thanks for joining me today. We are going to be talking about two up-and-coming books. I think they're going to be getting a lot of traction from a fantastic writer, James Tynion. We all know him. We're all fans of him, I hope. I think that we're kind of waiting for the next Something is Killing the Children. It has become extremely popular. The first few issues are super hot, really expensive, and those alone, I think, are still going to be moving upwards. But today, we're going to be talking about his other two books, his other two creations, one from Boom, one from DC Black Label. Boom is Wynd, and from DC Black Label is Nice House on the Lake. I have a few notes here that I'm going to be reading from because there's a lot of information I kind of want to get through. Yeah, if you're just joining me, I appreciate it. Hit that like button, subscribe, shoot me a comment. I love to chat, and I hope we can invoke a conversation about this and see where these books are going to be going. All right, let's get into it. So, James Tynion, born in Milwaukee, 1987. This sets up, actually, Wynd first, and then we'll get into the Nice House on the Lake. So, Tynion has had a fantastic career, mainly with Batman. Worked extensively on the New 52 and many other issues as well. And in that, he worked with a lot of different writers. Specifically, we're going to be talking about, I guess, Scott Snyder. He was under the, tutelage of Scott Snyder. Helped his career grow. And he also worked with Chris Conroy, who later moved on to the DC Black series, which helped create Nice House on the Lake. Along that way, he worked with artist, I'm going to mess this name up, Alvaro Martinez Bueno. And out of that relationship, I guess Nice House on the Lake also blossomed. But let's focus on Wynd first. Wynd was released in 2021. So, 2020 and 21. The story began a long time ago. Tynion put the name and the idea to paper, I believe, in his teenage years. He said that it was a place for him and his friends to escape to. The synopsis of the book is of Wynd. And he's beginning to realize that he has these magical abilities, but he becomes fearful because the town that he lives in, magic is punishable by death. So he becomes very fearful of that, and he embarks on this journey to learn more about magic, learn more about the magic within him. And it's quoted from Tynion. It says, "To find your home, first you have to find yourself." So when Wynd discovers he has some sort of magical abilities, he finds that his secret is threatened, and he's forced to leave his home and embark on a dangerous quest that puts him in the heart of a world conspiracy beyond imagination. I find it kind of interesting that it is reflective, I believe, of James Tynion's life of the time. And I find it also interesting that he has the ability now to bring it to fruition in this awesome story. a little bit more about the story. Wynd will end up discovering adventures and worlds beyond his imagination, as well as a true understanding of himself. So I'm kind of getting that it's a coming-of-age sort of story where he's understanding his magical abilities, how they fit within this magical world, and that adventure that ensues. Also, I'd mentioned previously, James Tynion in his career has worked with a lot of amazing people. And on Wynd, again, I'm going to not do this name. I'm going to butcher this name. Michael Delanis, that he co-created way back when the other book called The Woods. In developing this relationship, I guess he felt at ease to bring Wynd into fruition. But I believe and I know that it's just the beginning for this book. And like I said before, I think we're all kind of looking for that next Something is Killing the Children, the next book to really kind of take off, that sort of modern book. And I think that this could definitely be one of them. And I look forward to reading the other issues that I have coming in, but I think this is big and it's just starting to gain traction. The next book, again, kind of, I wouldn't say direct opposite, but it is a direct contrast to Wynd. And we're going to talk about Nice House on the Lake, which came out very recently in 2021. I also have a few other copies here. This was just a special release. And another variant cover, which is awesome. There's a few variant covers. And again, I think this is just the beginning for Nice House on the Lake. And let's get into that right now. It's a little bit more involved, I think, with this book. Again, James Tynion worked with a lot of different creators back in the day. Specifically, this one here, Alvaro Martinez Bueno, worked on some Batman series. And that relationship, I guess, was a seed that Tynion said to bringing Nice House on the Lake to fruition. He, I guess, did a career check a few years ago in 2019, and he was like, where do I want to be? In the next few years, he knew he had Something is Killing Children coming out. He knew he had Department of Truth coming out. So he wanted to see where his career was going to go. And I guess he had this idea, and working with Alvaro Martinez Bueno, who had the artistic ability to build this big, intricate set within a book that this thriller horror story could live, because it's really important to develop that, I guess, ambiance, that, again, that set where these 10 characters who are in this book could live. And he was concerned about being too boxed in. So knowing, working with Martinez Bueno, having the ability to do that, brought this idea to fruition. So it was written before COVID, but it has a lot of elements in it that are sort of reflective. And Tynion even said that he wants you to read it now, and it'll kind of mirror what's kind of happening, but he also wants to read it 5 years from now, and hopefully then it will still kind of mirror what's happening. The interesting point, he was asked how he had to pivot with this book, because it was written in 19 and the art was being drawn, I believe, in the summer of 19 as well. He said he added a few different things in the book which are apparent, and if you read the book, you'll see how he kind of evolved, how it's mirroring of 2021. It's a story of 10 people who get invited to a house on the lake by a mutual friend. I guess his name is Walter. And these people have very different personalities. And those are explained within the book. And that relationship each one has with the character who invites them. And then along the way, all this mayhem ensues, and it shows how each character deals with that. Tynion's idea of what a horror story is, it's how we approach that. I guess like anything in life. Do we approach it head on, or do we kind of approach it where we try and avoid it, pretend it's not there? But within this story, it's how each one is hitting these things head on, and how that develops the storyline. And one of the reasons he also wanted to work with Martin or Alvaro, I'm just going to call him Alvaro, it was because he created the setting of the house. I guess that was important to the story. Just like you're watching a horror movie where it's in a house, and in the beginning we are shown like each different room. We're shown, how you come into the place. Oh my God, how you get out of the place. Tini explained, one of the key elements to a horror is, knowing within like a certain space how it's entered, but then like something's happening. You're like, oh my God, that's the way to get out because we were shown that. And he wanted that kind of set built within this book. He believed that Alvaro could do this, and I believe he has. So let me kind of talk about how he developed the story and how it kind of mirrors what's sort of happening. In a quote, he said he feels that the horrors from the 80s, 90s, and even the 2000s were based on cultural fears. And what was happening is there were just these remixes of these stories that were kind of created in the 70s and 80s. And he states that it was kind of like the last big moment of unrest. Well, now we're in a different kind of moment, even prior to COVID, of this sort of unrest. And that's where these, or this story evolves from. There are a lot of fears you can create out of horror, because I think the best horror is always traps into something of what people are afraid of in society, and I think that is truly poignant. Again, there were some pivots within the book with regards to COVID, but once you read the book, you'll kind of see them. Apparently, there's character in issue 4 that is really sort of representative of it, and he had to kind of change that character because of everything that happened within last year and now. Let's talk a little bit about how this book came to see the light of day. So again, I mentioned he worked with Chris Conroy on a lot of DC work, Batman. I guess Chris Conroy was also working at what Black Label was originally called was Vertigo. So let's talk about Vertigo for a second. It started in 1983 by Karen Berger. DC created that branch for adult audiences, and a lot of violence, a lot of drug use, a lot of profanity, etc. And it had many different books along the way, and I think it dissolved or changed over to DC Black Series in 2019 or 2020, and Chris Conroy took he's editor-in-chief now. So James had this idea for the book that was created by his relationship with Alvaro. And he approached Chris Conroy. He wasn't sure where he could bring this idea, so he approached Chris Conroy. He wasn't sure that DC would allow, I guess, creators to bring in their own content. Pitched the story. Chris Conroy apparently loved it. And now we have a nice house on the lake. Again, I think it has still a ton of potential. We're only seeing just the start of it. And I think it's going to unfold into something huge. I believe it does have the same kind of trajectory as Something Is Killing the Children, but just my opinion. We'll see where it goes. Just another little bit of information with his relationship with Chris Conroy. I guess they had worked on. He worked on the series with Chris Conroy, Detective Comics run. I guess it had a huge. I'm not familiar with it. A lot of characters, a lot of organizing of information, a lot of things that was happening. So that was the other reason that Tynion kind of wanted to work again with Chris Conroy, because he could kind of help him corral all that's going on with the characters in Nice House on the Lake. So it was another reason he wanted to work with him on this. Just a few more notes that I have. There's a little note about working with Alvaro. So much Nice House on the Lake is me working with Alvaro Martinez Bueno for the last 5 years and seeing all sorts of things that he does incredibly well, and waiting to tell this big story that takes advantage of the elements of storytelling in his hands so incredibly well. I think that's amazing that a story can come from a relationship that you have, a creative relationship that you have with someone that I guess you deem as a as a peer. I find that fascinating. The last point I kind of want to touch on was some information that Tynion had regarding horror stories in comics. They're gaining a lot of traction. Like, it seems to be 2021 is the year for horror stories in comics. I really do think that everything that we've experienced is being reflected into the art form of comics, and everything that we went through, the lockdowns with COVID, with everybody experiencing all these stresses and different situations and unknowns, is creating this plethora of content that is horror related. I think that's why it's gaining so much traction, not only for what's being produced, but consuming it. Like, we went through this and we're like, oh my God, people are they're talking about this, and I want to get involved in it. And I really do think that is the reason that we're seeing this renaissance for horror right now. And Tynion was right. All the stuff that was created back in the 70s and 80s and 90s, it was all just sort of rehashing of the same thing. We're in this new generation. We're in this new realm of horror literature and comics. And I think these creators are getting an understanding of how to present it well, because I think back in the day, critics of comics thought that horror couldn't be done properly because of the suspense that was built in books or movies, where you didn't actually kind of know what was going on, who's the big bad. You didn't really see it, very small little reveals, and they thought that couldn't be done in comics. But we're seeing that it can, and it's very effective. But Tynion had some interesting takes on how he developed that sort of way to consume horror in this medium. He believes that there are limitations in horror comics because of the pacing, where the reader's always in control. In your comic book, they can read the book at whatever length they want, which means it's very difficult to control the drumbeat towards the reveal. And the only thing that the only opportunity that you really have to really scare somebody is when you turn the page and you reveal something. But even on the page turn, Tynion believes that the way they read the comics is when they turn the page and they see that full spread, they generally go up to the left to start reading, but sometimes they'll glance down at the right, and they reveal kind of what was being built up to that point, and you spoil yourself. But he says he tries to control that with the dialogue that's happening. But he says that the key emotion that I'm always trying to build in horror comics is dread. That kind of weighty feeling, he says, that there's something wrong and there's something bad that's going to happen. And you know when it's going to happen, but you have to pay close attention to it. I guess his final thoughts, if you can get readers feeling that sort of dread, then you can get away with a lot. But it's one of those things where there's dread, and then you can shock people with an incredibly horrific image. Those two are the key moves, I think, in horror comics. So with those are the ones I'm always trying to play with. It's an interesting kind of take on it. I'd like to see where this book evolves to. Again, I think it's just the beginning for this. I knew there's going to be a little bit more information regarding that because it sits right in the, this huge realm of horror that's being published right now. Then his other offering, Wynd, which I still feel has a lot of potential and a wonderful book, and I think it plays to a different kind of ideology that we're feeling. So that's kind of my take on these two books. I think that they have a ton of potential. I think we're only seeing the start of it. I do believe that The Nice House on the Lake is on the trajectory that Something Is Killing the Children is on. So I'm gathering up the copies that I want and holding on to and seeing where it's go. But I'm confident that in terms of spec, that there's going to be some value in some of the earlier offerings of this book. With Wynd, I also think that it's just kind of like the beginning of it. I have the utmost faith that it's going to develop into something great. And when I do say develop, I think it's going to be either on, something on TV, something in the movies, but I think they both have potential. Pretty much anything that Tynion is writing right now is just on fire, and he's at the top of his game. I have the utmost faith in both of these books, specifically Nice House on the Lake. I'm particularly excited for that. Yeah, that's what I have. I thought it was kind of interesting to kind of dive into a bit of James Tynion's background, a little bit of the background of some of the co-creators of both of these books and how they came to see the light of day. I find it extremely interesting. With all these kind of interactions, it's the same thing within our community where we see growth in people's Instagram pages or YouTube channels because of all the co-creating, collaborations, the working off of each other. It's the same kind of thing is happening there that's happening in these books day in, day out. And I'm super excited to see where not only these books go, but where everything else kind of transpires with this community. It's fantastic. It just seems to be getting more traction, and the content is just outstanding. I look forward to it, and each and every day I'm amazed that people are just being so creative within this realm and within this community. So that's what I have for today, guys. Thanks for joining me. I know there was a lot of information, and I could have gone a little bit more in depth with some of it, but I thought that was just sort of my take on these two books, my take on the horror genre right now, and a little bit of my take on some of the co-creators and James Tynion's work right now within these two books. So that's what I have. Thanks for joining me today. Appreciate it. I will see you guys on the next video. Take care. Cheers.